The sickening crack of stone against advanced polyalloy and shatter-resistant glass was the sound that ripped Dr. Ellie Ramirez's world apart. It was a sound immediately followed by a choked guttural cry of such profound despair from her 10-year-old son Ethan that it felt like a physical blow to her own chest. Ellie, who had been on a conference call in her home office, overlooking their meticulously kept backyard, slammed her laptop shut and flew down the stairs, her heart already a frantic drum against her ribs. Ethan, who was paralyzed from the chest, down due to a rare neurological condition diagnosed in early childhood, and was nonverbal, spent his afternoons in the shaded patio, his specialized wheelchair positioned for optimal comfort, his world opened up by the gleaming voice tablet mounted before him. It was his bridge to her to everyone, his only means of complex expression. She burst onto the patio to a scene of shocking, deliberate violence. Ethan was rigid in his chair, his head thrown back, his usually expressive brown eyes wide with a terror and helpless fury that seared itself into Ellie's memory. His thin chest heaved with ragged, silent sobs. And at his feet, a brutal tableau, his state-of-the-art, custom-programmed, augmentative and alternative communication AAC tablet. His voice, his intellect's portal, lay in a spiderweb of shattered glass and twisted metal. Beside it, a jagged gray rock, still bearing the sickening imprint of its impact. And standing over it all, a figure of righteous, unyielding disapproval, was Karen Jenkins, the self-appointed guardian of neighborhood aesthetics and president of the Willow Creek Commons Homeowners Association. Karen held another rock in her hand, her knuckles white, her face a mask of cold, dismissive contempt. There, Karen Jenkins said, her voice devoid of any discernible human empathy, as she tossed the second rock onto the grass with a thud. That infernal beeping, unnatural contraption has been an eyesore and a disturbance for far too long. He doesn't talk anyway. Never has, never will. All that expensive gadgetry is just a pointless charade and attention-seeking display. Now, maybe we'll have some peace and quiet around here, and he can learn to accept his limitations. Ellie's vision tunneled. The bright afternoon sun, the scent of blooming jasmine from her carefully tended trellis, the distant sound of children playing. It all receded into a roaring crimson-tinged void. Only Ethan's shattered voice and Karen Jenkins's monstrous pronouncement remained. He doesn't talk anyway. The casual cruelty of it, the profound bedrock ignorance, was like a fist to her gut. Ethan, whose brilliant, curious mind was trapped within a body that wouldn't obey, whose every coherent thought, every nuanced emotion, every urgent need was painstakingly articulated through that now destroyed tablet, was being dismissed as a non-entity, his very personhood negated. A low sound, almost a growl, vibrated in Ellie's chest. She was Dr. Elena Ramirez, a leading forensic investigator in the highly specialized field of speech technology crimes. Her entire professional life was dedicated to analyzing, recovering, and protecting the very kinds of devices Karen Jenkins had just so wantonly annihilated. She dealt with cases of hacked medical devices, stolen intellectual property embedded in communication software, and the malicious destruction of assistive technologies used by the most vulnerable. She understood the intricate lacework of federal and state laws designed to protect individuals like Ethan, and the vital technology that gave them a voice. Karen Jenkins, in her breathtaking arrogance and profound cruelty, had not just destroyed a piece of equipment. She had committed a serious felony, a hate crime, and she had done it in front of the one person in the state uniquely equipped to ensure she faced the full, unmitigated consequences of her actions. Ethan. Ellie whispered, rushing to her son's side, her hand gently touching his trembling shoulder. His eyes, when they finally focused on hers, were filled with a desolation so profound it was like looking into an abyss. He made a small, frustrated sound, his fingers twitching uselessly, his primary mode of communication, the eye-gaze interface on his tablet, now a cruel mockery of shattered glass. "Don't you coddle him, Elena," Karen Jenkins admonished, her voice sharp. "He needs to learn. This neighborhood has standards. We can't all be expected to accommodate this." She gestured vaguely, encompassing Ethan, his wheelchair, the ruin of his tablet. Ellie rose slowly, her movements deliberate, her gaze, when it finally settled, on Karen Jenkins, holding a glacial, lethal calm that should have warned the other woman, but didn't. "Karen." Ellie said, her voice deceptively soft, each word a precisely sharpened icicle. What you have just done is not only an act of unspeakable cruelty, it is a federal crime. You have willfully destroyed a designated medical assistive communication device essential for the health, safety, and well-being of a disabled minor. That is a felony under the Americans with Disabilities Act, further enhanced by statutes protecting vulnerable individuals from targeted abuse. You have also committed aggravated assault by terrorizing my son and depriving him of his ability to communicate distress or call for help. Karen Jenkins actually scoffed. Don't be ridiculous, Elena. It was an accident. The rock slipped. And it's just a computer. You can buy another one. Besides, I told you he doesn't even use it properly. He just stares at it. That computer, Karen. Ellie's voice, hardened the professional investigator now fully in command, was custom-built and programmed for Ethan's specific neurological pathways. It cost upwards of $30,000, much of it covered by specialized medical grants. It contained years of his vocabulary development, his personalized communication matrices, his schoolwork, his medical logs. It was quite literally his voice, his connection to the world. And you smashed it with a rock because you found it inconvenient. She pulled out her phone, her fingers already dialing. I am now notifying the authorities. Do not leave this patio. You are being detained as a suspect in a federal felony investigation. Anything you say from this point forward can and will be used against you. Karen Jenkins' face, for the first time, registered a flicker of something other than smug self-righteousness. A dawning unease, perhaps. But still the arrogance remained. You can't be serious. You're overreacting. I'm the HOA president. I was simply addressing a long-standing neighborhood complaint. The only complaint I'm addressing right now, Karen. Ellie said, her voice like chipped granite, as the dispatcher's voice came on the line, is the one I'm about to file against you for felony disability abuse and destruction of essential medical technology. And trust me, as a lead investigator in this exact field, it's a complaint I know how to make stick. The quiet, sun-drenched patio moments before a scene of innocent engagement had just become ground zero for a legal and moral battle that would shake Willow Creek Commons to its very foundations. And Karen Jenkins, in her blind prejudice, had just picked a fight with an expert warrior she never even knew existed. The arrival of local police officers, followed shortly by a grim-faced team of federal agents dispatched from Ellie's own speech technology crimes unit, transformed the tranquil suburban cul-de-sac into a hive of official activity. Yellow crime scene tape was stretched across Ellie's patio, a stark visual incongruity against the backdrop of blooming roses and neatly trimmed hedges. Karen Jenkins, after an initial bout of indignant blustering about her rights and her position as HOA president, had been read her Miranda rights and was now sitting pale and subdued in the back of a local police cruiser, her expensive linen suit looking rumpled and out of place. The rock she had used, along with the shattered remnants of Ethan's voice tablet, were being meticulously photographed, bagged and labeled as evidence by forensic technicians who normally specialized in recovering data from fire-damaged servers or hacked corporate networks. Today, their expertise was focused on the brutal, low-tech destruction of a child's only voice. Ellie, after ensuring Ethan was being attended to by his trusted respite caregiver and that his neurologist and speech pathologist were en route for an emergency consultation, found herself giving a formal statement to Special Agent Marcus Thorne, a senior colleague from her unit who had taken lead on the federal aspect of the case to avoid any appearance of conflict of interest. She said he doesn't talk anyway. Ellie recounted, her voice tight with a grief and rage that was still too raw to fully process. She said it was an eyesore, a pointless charade. She had another rock in her hand, Thorne. She was going to smash his wheelchair too, I think, if I hadn't come out. Marcus Thorne, a man who had investigated some of the most sophisticated tech crimes imaginable, listened with a deepening frown, his expression hardening with each detail. This isn't just destruction of property, Ellie. He said, his voice low. This is a hate crime, pure and simple. The targeted nature, the dehumanizing language she used, the profound impact on Ethan's ability to function, it ticks every box. We'll be pursuing charges under every applicable federal statute, including the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act, on top of the ADA violations and felony destruction of a medical device. Ethan's immediate distress was heartbreaking. Without his tablet, he was effectively silenced, locked inside his own mind, his intelligent, active thoughts and urgent needs uncommunicable except through the most rudimentary of yes-no blinks, or the frustrated guttural sounds that were his only vocalizations. His speech pathologist, Dr. Anya Sharma, a different Anya from previous stories' purely coincidental naming in the narrative flow of requests, arrived looking horrified. "Elena, this is catastrophic," she said after a brief, agonizing attempt to communicate with Ethan using a basic picture board. His entire linguistic world was in that device, the customized vocabulary, the predictive algorithms that learned his communication patterns, the synthesized voice that he had chosen that he identified as his voice. It's all gone. Rebuilding that, even with a new device, will take months, perhaps years. The psychological impact on him, the regression, it's incalculable. The preliminary assessment of the shattered tablet by Ellie's forensic tech team was grim. The impact had been brutal, directly to the central processing unit and the custom eye gaze sensor array. Data recovery, if possible at all, would be a painstaking, highly complex process, requiring clean room conditions and microsoldering skills of the highest order. And even then, there were no guarantees. The software, the unique configurations that made the tablet Ethan's voice, might be irretrievably lost. The cost of a replacement device similarly customized would be tens of thousands of dollars, and the waiting list for such specialized technology, along with the intricate process of reprogramming and recalibrating it for Ethan's specific needs, was daunting. Karen Jenkins, to Ellie's utter disgust but not surprise, was released on bail the following day. Her husband, a wealthy and influential local businessman with deep pockets and a network of powerful friends, had hired one of the top defense attorneys in the state, a notorious legal shark known for his aggressive tactics and his ability to get well-heeled clients off on technicalities. The conditions of Karen's bail were strict. No contact with the Ramirez family, surrender of her passport, regular check-ins with a bail officer. But the fact that she was back in her home just a few houses down the street was a constant, unnerving presence for Ellie and Ethan. The Willow Creek Commons HOA predictably was thrown into turmoil. An emergency board meeting was convened from which a vaguely worded statement was issued, expressing regret over the unfortunate incident and promising a thorough internal review of community policies. There was no condemnation of Karen Jenkins's actions, no offer of support for Ethan or Ellie. It was clear that Karen, despite her arrest, still wielded considerable influence within the HOA power structure, or that the remaining board members were too intimidated or too spineless to take a principled stand. The real battle, Ellie knew, was just beginning. While the federal criminal case against Karen moved forward, driven by Marcus Thorne's team, Ellie found herself fighting on multiple other fronts, navigating the complex and often frustrating bureaucracy of medical insurance and assistive technology funding to secure a replacement device for Ethan, managing Ethan's profound emotional distress and the regression in his communication skills, and dealing with the insidious, creeping campaign of harassment and victim blaming that Karen Jenkins and her allies began to orchestrate within the community. Anonymous flyers appeared in mailboxes defending Karen as a concerned citizen who was being unfairly persecuted by an overzealous federal agent. They suggested Ethan's condition was not as severe as claimed, and that his expensive tablet was an unnecessary extravagance. Online neighborhood forums buzzed with ugly rumors and coded insinuations painting Ellie as an aggressive outsider, trying to exploit her son's disability for personal gain. Some neighbors, previously friendly, now averted their eyes when Ellie passed, or offered platitudes about understanding both sides of the story. The poison of Karen Jenkins's bigotry was spreading, seeking to isolate and discredit her victims. Then came the official HOA notices. The first was a citation for improperly stored electronic equipment on a patio, referring to the now sealed crime scene where Ethan's tablet had been destroyed. The second was a demand that Ellie remove the temporary ramp they had installed years ago for Ethan's wheelchair access to their front door, claiming it was not in compliance with newly revised aesthetic guidelines. The newly revised guidelines, Ellie discovered, had been pushed through by Karen Jenkins just weeks before the attack on Ethan's tablet, clearly designed to target them. It was a relentless petty war of attrition designed to wear Ellie down, to make her life in Willow Creek Commons so unbearable that she would simply give up and move away. But Karen Jenkins had profoundly underestimated Elena Ramirez. Ellie was not just a grieving mother. She was a seasoned investigator, an expert in the very technologies and laws Karen had so contemptuously violated. And she was not going to back down. She meticulously documented every instance of harassment, every HOA notice, every slanderous online comment, building a separate civil case for targeted discrimination and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She rallied support from national disability rights organizations, from veteran tech crime units she had liaised with, from a network of parents of children with complex communication needs who understood with a visceral empathy the horror of what had happened to Ethan. The fight for Ethan's voice became a fight for the rights of all vulnerable individuals to live with dignity, safety, and the means to communicate. Ellie knew that the forensic recovery of data from Ethan's shattered tablet, if successful, would be crucial. It might contain the final images Ethan had been trying to select, the last words he had been trying to speak, before Karen Jenkins had so brutally silenced him. And it might contain incontrovertible digital evidence of Karen's actions, perhaps a reflection in the screen, a soundbite captured by its microphone, something that would nail the lid on her legal coffin. Ellie's team at the Speech Tech Crimes Unit, working off hours pro bono with a fierce loyalty to their chief, began the painstaking, almost impossible task of trying to resurrect Ethan's stolen voice from the digital graveyard of his broken tablet. The battle was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. The weeks following Karen Jenkins's arrest and release on bail were a descent into a surreal kind of suburban warfare. While the federal criminal investigation proceeded with Marcus Thorne's team meticulously building an ironclad case, Ellie found herself engaged in a daily struggle against a campaign of insidious harassment and bureaucratic obstruction, clearly orchestrated by Karen and her remaining allies on the HOA board. The petty violation notices continued to arrive with unnerving regularity. Complaints about the color of Ethan's wheelchair, too bright apparently for Willow Creek Commons, subdued aesthetic, about the clutter of his necessary medical supplies, visible through a window, even about the excessive beeping from his apnea monitor at night. Each notice was a carefully crafted pinprick designed to exhaust Ellie's patience and resources, to make her feel under constant siege in her own home. Ethan's world, without his voice tablet, had shrunk to a suffocating degree. His frustration was a palpable entity in their home, a heavy cloud of unspoken words, unmet needs, and profound isolation. He would bang his fists on his wheelchair tray, his face contorted in anguish, his eyes pleading with Ellie to understand what she could no longer easily decipher. His sleep was shattered by nightmares. His progress in school, previously so promising with the aid of his tablet, ground to a halt. His therapists, Dr. Sharma and his occupational therapist, Mr. Chen, did their best with low-tech communication boards and eye-gaze charts, but it was like trying to paint a masterpiece with a single broken crayon. The richness, the nuance, the sheer speed of his thoughts were trapped, dammed up behind a wall of silence. The process of obtaining a replacement tablet was a bureaucratic nightmare. Insurance approvals, specialized vendor assessments, grant applications. Each step was fraught with delays and complications. Ellie suspected Karen Jenkins, with her network of local business and political connections, was subtly interfering, spreading misinformation, casting doubt on the necessity of such an expensive device. One particularly galling incident involved a call from a state funding agency questioning the validity of the medical claim for Ethan's AAC device, citing an anonymous tip that suggested he was capable of verbal communication if properly motivated. The cruelty, the sheer ignorance of it, left Ellie momentarily speechless, but it also fueled her determination. She fought back with the tenacity and expertise that defined her professional life. She meticulously documented every communication, every notice, every instance of suspected interference, forwarding it all to Marcus Thorne and her own civil attorney. She attended HOA board meetings armed with copies of the ADA Fair Housing Act statutes and Ethan's extensive medical records, calmly and systematically refuting their baseless complaints, often to the visible discomfort of the board members who were clearly out of their depth when confronted with actual legal expertise. She also began to connect with other families in Willow Creek Commons, particularly those with elderly or disabled members, and discovered a disturbing pattern. Karen Jenkins had a long history of using the HOA as a weapon to bully, harass, and marginalize anyone she deemed undesirable or who dared to question her authority. Stories emerged of arbitrary fines, denied requests for reasonable accommodations, and a general atmosphere of intimidation that had cowed many residents into silence. One evening, a young mother named Sarah Chen, whose daughter had severe autism and also used a communication device, approached Ellie after a particularly contentious HOA meeting. Dr. Ramirez. Sarah said, her voice hesitant but firm. What Karen Jenkins did to Ethan. She's been trying to do similar things in smaller ways to my Lily for years. Complaining about her vocalizations about her therapy equipment, trying to restrict her access to the community pool. I was always too afraid to speak up, but seeing you fight back, it's given me courage. There are others too. We're tired of being bullied. This was a turning point. Ellie realized she wasn't just fighting for Ethan. She was fighting for an entire hidden contingent of her community. She began to organize to gather their stories to build a collective case against Karen Jenkins and the complicit HOA board, not just for the attack on Ethan, but for a pattern of systemic discrimination. Meanwhile, Ellie's forensic tech team at the Speech Tech Crimes Unit was making slow, painstaking progress with Ethan's shattered tablet. The damage was severe, but the device had been built to withstand a certain amount of rough handling, and its internal memory core, though fractured, was not completely destroyed. Using microsoldering techniques, bypassing damaged circuits, and writing custom data recovery algorithms, they began to retrieve fragments of Ethan's last communications. It was like piecing together a shattered mosaic, but gradually, a picture began to emerge. They recovered corrupted audio files, the last sounds captured by the tablet's microphone before impact. They found fragmented image data from its outward-facing camera. And most significantly, they started to reconstruct the cached data from Ethan's communication software, the sequence of symbols and words he had been selecting in the moments before the attack. The midpoint twist in the investigation came not from Karen Jenkins's past, but from the digital ghost resurrected from Ethan's broken tablet. One of the lead techs, a brilliant young woman named Maya, a different Maya called Ellie into the lab, her face alight with a mixture of excitement and grim satisfaction. "Commander Ramirez," she said, "I think we've got something. Something big." On the monitor was a partially reconstructed image sequence from the tablet's camera captured in the milliseconds before it was struck. It was blurry, distorted, but unmistakably showed Karen Jenkins's face contorted in anger, her hand raised holding a gray, jagged rock. And then even more damning, a recovered audio snippet just a few seconds long, filtered and enhanced. It was Karen's voice, sharp and clear, saying, "Always knew you were a problem, you and that noisy machine. Time to shut you both up for good." This was the smoking gun. Not just the act of destruction, but clear, unequivocal proof of premeditation, of intent to silence, of a malice that went far beyond a momentary loss of temper. But there was more. As Maya continued to reconstruct the cached communication data, they found the sequence Ethan had been painstakingly assembling on his tablet right before Karen snatched it. He had been using a new feature, a journaling app that allowed him to select images and symbols to record his observations. The sequence was picture of Karen Jenkins plus symbol for angry face, plus his picture of a neighbor's cat, a ginger tabby named Marmalade that often visited their yard, plus symbol for hitting, throwing, plus picture of a large distinctive blue recycling bin that belonged to the house behind Karen Jenkins's property, a house owned by an elderly reclusive man named Mr. Henderson. Ellie stared at the sequence, her blood running cold. What had Ethan seen? Had he witnessed Karen Jenkins doing something to Marmalade the cat, something involving that blue recycling bin? Marmalade had been missing for 2 days, his owner, Mrs. Gable, frantic with worry. Karen had often complained about Marmalade trespassing in her prize-winning petunias. Could Ethan have been trying to tell them something about Marmalade's disappearance? Something he had seen Karen do, and had Karen realized he was about to expose her? Had her attack on his tablet been not just an act of bigotry, but a desperate attempt to destroy evidence, to silence a witness to another, perhaps even darker crime? This new, horrifying possibility shifted the entire focus of the investigation. Ellie immediately contacted Marcus Thorne and the local police detectives assigned to the missing cat case. They obtained a warrant to search Karen Jenkins's property and the surrounding areas, including Mr. Henderson's blue recycling bin. What they found in that bin, hidden beneath bags of ordinary trash, confirmed Ellie's darkest fears, the small, lifeless body of Marmalade, the cat, his neck bearing the unmistakable marks of deliberate manual strangulation. And stuck to the fur, near the wounds, almost invisible to the naked eye, were several fibers that looked suspiciously like they came from Karen Jenkins's favorite cashmere gardening gloves. Karen Jenkins wasn't just a bully, a bigot, or even a potential embezzler, though her HOA financials were also now under intense scrutiny. She was capable of calculated cold-blooded violence against animals, and as her attack on Ethan's tablet demonstrated against anything or anyone she perceived as a threat or an inconvenience. The destruction of Ethan's voice had been an attempt to silence a witness to her cruelty. The stakes had just been raised to an almost unimaginable level. The upcoming HOA Community Forum on Responsible Technology Use, which Karen, with breathtaking audacity, still planned to headline, was no longer just about defending Ethan's rights. It was about exposing a truly dangerous individual before she could harm anyone else. Ellie, armed with the digital ghost of Ethan's last message and the grim reality of what it had revealed, prepared for a confrontation that would be far more than just a neighborhood dispute. It would be a battle against a darkness that had hidden for too long in plain sight. The atmosphere in the Willow Creek Commons Community Center on the evening of Karen Jenkins's ironically titled Community Forum on Responsible Technology Use and Neighborhood Aesthetics was electric. A volatile cocktail of simmering anger, nervous anticipation, and a morbid curiosity that had drawn residents from every corner of the subdivision. Karen, out on bail but facing a terrifying array of federal and now potential state charges, had insisted on this forum, a desperate, audacious attempt to reclaim the narrative, to paint herself as the victim, and to rally her dwindling base of support. She sat at the head table, flanked by her increasingly stressed-looking defense attorney and a couple of die-hard HOA loyalists, her expression a carefully constructed mask of aggrieved martyrdom. Ellie Ramirez entered the packed hall with Ethan by her side. Ethan, thanks to the tireless efforts of Ellie's tech team and a rush order on a new, slightly less customized loaner device, had a temporary voice again. It wasn't his voice, not the familiar synthesized tones he had chosen and grown with, but it was a lifeline, a way to communicate, and his presence beside his mother, his small hand resting on her arm, was a powerful silent statement. They were accompanied by Dr. Sharma, Ethan's speech pathologist, Mr. Chen, his occupational therapist, and Sarah Chen with her daughter Lily, a visible show of solidarity. Marcus Thorne and several plainclothes federal agents, along with local police detectives, were dispersed discreetly throughout the audience. The meeting began predictably, with Karen Jenkins launching into a lengthy, rambling diatribe. She decried the witch hunt against her, the invasion of her privacy, the slanderous accusations leveled by a vindictive federal agent with a personal vendetta. She spoke of her decades of selfless service to the Willow Creek Commons community, her tireless efforts to uphold property values and maintain a harmonious living environment. She portrayed the destruction of Ethan's tablet as an unfortunate accident, a misunderstanding, blown out of all proportion by an overprotective mother seeking to exploit her son's condition for sympathy and financial gain. She even had the gall to suggest that Ethan's inability to speak was perhaps not as profound as claimed, and that the expensive tablet was an unnecessary indulgence. But her supporters in the audience, a small but vocal clutch, applauded dutifully, though many more residents listened with expressions of growing disgust and outrage. When it was Ellie's turn to speak, a profound, anticipatory silence fell over the room. She didn't go to the podium. Instead, she stood beside Ethan, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. "Good evening," she began, her voice calm, clear, and resonant, with an authority that commanded attention. "My name is Dr. Elena Ramirez. I am a resident of this community. I am a mother, and I am a forensic investigator specializing in speech technology crimes. We are here tonight not to discuss responsible technology use in the abstract, but to address a specific criminal act of violence and bigotry perpetrated by Ms. Karen Jenkins against my son, Ethan." With chilling precision, Ellie laid out the evidence. She projected onto a large screen the partially recovered images from Ethan's tablet's camera, showing Karen Jenkins's face contorted with rage, rock in hand, in the milliseconds before impact. She played the enhanced audio snippet. "Always knew you were a problem, you and that noisy machine. Time to shut you both up for good." The raw, premeditated malice in Karen's voice sent a visible shudder through the audience. Karen herself went deathly pale, her composure finally cracking her attorney frantically trying to silence her as she began to stammer protests. "This was not an accident, Ms. Jenkins," Ellie said, her gaze unwavering. This was a deliberate attempt to silence my son, to destroy his only means of communication, to erase his voice because you found it and him inconvenient. She then detailed the devastating impact on Ethan, the trauma, the regression, the agonizing frustration of being rendered voiceless. Dr. Sharma and Mr. Chen briefly, powerfully corroborated her account, speaking to the medical and developmental necessity of Ethan's AAC device. Then Ellie addressed the issue of Marmalade, Mrs. Gable's missing, murdered cat. She projected the reconstructed communication sequence from Ethan's tablet, Karen Jenkins, plus angry face, plus Marmalade, plus hitting, throwing, plus Mr. Henderson's blue recycling bin. My son, Ethan, Ellie said, her voice thick with emotion, was not just playing on his tablet that afternoon. He was trying to tell us something. He was trying to be a witness. He saw Ms. Jenkins harming Marmalade, and he was trying to record what he saw to communicate it, to seek help for an innocent creature. And for that act of courage, for that attempt to speak truth to cruelty, Ms. Jenkins brutally silenced him. She then revealed the grim discovery of Marmalade's body in the recycling bin, the evidence of strangulation, the fibers matching Karen's gloves. Mrs. Gable, Marmalade's owner, let out a heartbroken sob from the audience. The mood in the room shifted from anger to a kind of horrified revulsion. Karen Jenkins was no longer just a neighborhood bully. She was a violent criminal capable of shocking cruelty. Karen Jenkins. Ellie declared, her voice ringing with condemnation. You are charged with felony destruction of a medical assistive device, aggravated assault on a disabled minor, and multiple counts under federal hate crime statutes. And now, based on the evidence recovered from my son's tablet, the voice you tried to destroy, you will also face charges for aggravated animal cruelty and obstruction of justice. Your reign of bigotry and violence in this community is over. As Ellie finished speaking, Marcus Thorne and the other law enforcement officers rose and moved purposefully towards the head table. Karen Jenkins. Marcus announced, his voice leaving no room for argument. You are under arrest for the aforementioned state and federal charges. Please stand and place your hands behind your back. Karen Jenkins let out a series of piercing shrieks, a wild, cornered animal. She lunged not at the officers, but at Ellie, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. Her hands clawed. You did this to me. You and your freak son, I'll kill you both. Before she could reach Ellie, she was intercepted by two officers, subdued, handcuffed, and forcibly removed from the room, still screaming threats and obscenities. Her attorney stood by, pale and defeated, making no attempt to intervene. The remaining HOA board members looked as if they had seen a ghost, their faces ashen with the realization of the full extent of the evil they had harbored and enabled. In the stunned, ringing silence that followed Karen Jenkins' removal, Ethan Ramirez, using his temporary voice tablet, slowly, painstakingly typed out a message. His synthesized voice, clear and steady, filled the room. Bad lady gone. Marmalade. Sad. Max is okay now for Sophie and the other story. Ethan safe. Thank you, Mom. I love you. A wave of profound emotion swept through the room. Tears streamed down many faces. Sarah Chen rushed forward to hug Ellie. Other residents surged around them, offering apologies, support, gratitude. The spell of fear and intimidation Karen Jenkins had cast over Willow Creek Commons was broken. In its place was a fragile, tentative, but powerful sense of shared humanity, of a community beginning to find its way back from the brink. Ellie held Ethan close, her own tears, finally falling tears of grief, of rage, but also of a fierce, unyielding love, and a hard-won, bittersweet justice. The fight was over. The healing could now begin. The legal downfall of Karen Jenkins was as swift as it was comprehensive. Faced with the irrefutable forensic evidence from Ethan's recovered tablet data, the eyewitness accounts, the discovery of Marmalade's body, and her own damning words and actions, her high-powered attorney advised her that her only viable option was a plea bargain. She pleaded guilty to a slew of federal and state charges, including felony destruction of a medical assistive device, aggravated assault on a disabled minor with a hate crime enhancement, and aggravated animal cruelty. The judge, visibly appalled by the calculated cruelty and profound bigotry demonstrated by her actions, sentenced Karen Jenkins to the maximum term allowable under the plea agreement, a lengthy sentence in federal prison, to be followed by an equally long period of supervised release with stringent conditions, including a lifetime ban on residing in any community with an active HOA mandatory anger management and anti-bigotry counseling, and a permanent restraining order, preventing her from ever contacting or coming within 1,000 yards of Ethan Ramirez or his family. Her assets were also targeted for significant restitution payments to Ellie for the replacement of Ethan's tablet and his ongoing therapy, and to Mrs. Gable for the loss of Marmalade. The Willow Creek Commons Homeowners Association, shamed and rudderless, underwent a radical transformation. The remaining board members resigned en masse. A new board was elected, composed of residents including Sarah Chen, who were committed to fostering a truly inclusive, accessible, and compassionate community. They immediately rescinded all of Karen Jenkins's punitive and discriminatory bylaws. They issued a formal public apology to Ellie Ethan and all other residents who had been harmed by Karen's reign of terror. They established an independent ethics committee and accessibility task force and partnered with local disability rights organizations to provide education and sensitivity training for all residents. The HOA, once an instrument of oppression, began to evolve into a genuine force for positive community engagement. Ethan received a new state-of-the-art voice tablet, even more advanced and customized than his previous one. Its purchase was expedited by national disability advocacy groups who had been galvanized by his story and supplemented by a spontaneous community fundraising effort within Willow Creek Commons, a tangible expression of their remorse and support. The day his new voice was activated, a voice he had chosen himself, a voice that sounded strong and clear and uniquely, his was a day of profound joy for Ethan and everyone who loved him. He quickly surpassed his previous communication milestones, his brilliant mind once silenced, now soaring with newfound freedom of expression. He even started a blog, Ethan's World Word by Word, sharing his experiences, his insights, and his wicked sense of humor with a growing online audience. Ellie Ramirez, while continuing her vital work at the Speech Tech Crimes Unit, became a prominent national advocate for the rights of nonverbal individuals and for stronger legal protections against the destruction or misuse of assistive communication technologies. The forensic techniques her team had pioneered in recovering data from Ethan's shattered tablet became standard protocols in the field, helping to solve other cases and bring justice to other vulnerable victims. She often said that while Karen Jenkins had tried to destroy her son's voice, she had inadvertently amplified it, giving him and countless others like him a platform to be heard around the world. Months later, Willow Creek Commons dedicated a new fully accessible community garden and sensory park named Ethan's Grove in his honor. At the dedication ceremony, Ethan, using his new voice tablet, delivered a short, powerful speech. "Words are important." His synthesized voice rang out clear and confident. "My voice is important. Everyone's voice is important. Kindness is important. Thank you for listening." As the community applauded, many with tears in their eyes, Ellie stood beside her son, her heart swelling with a love and pride so immense it almost took her breath away. The journey had been unimaginably painful, a descent into a darkness she had never thought to encounter in her own quiet suburban life. But they had emerged not unscathed, but unbroken. They had faced down hatred with courage, ignorance with truth, and cruelty with an unyielding commitment to justice. And in doing so, they had not only reclaimed Ethan's voice, but had helped their entire community find its own, better, more compassionate one. The silence imposed by Karen Jenkins had been shattered, replaced by a symphony of understanding, acceptance, and hope. A symphony in which every voice, no matter how it was expressed, had a vital, beautiful part to play.